Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 21 of the Slanted Attic Experience. Today, we're thrilled to introduce Angela, a dynamic creator whose journey into fashion began in an unexpected way. After graduating in 2020 and feeling unsure about her next steps, she discovered a passion for sewing and upcycling that quickly evolved into a deep obsession with the history of textiles and clothing production. By 2022, she had begun developing Common Mercury, her innovative brand that officially launched this year in 2024. Join us as we explore how Angela's love for craftsmanship and sustainable fashion helped shape her creative path and her vision for Common Mercury. This is somebody that I've wanted to have on here for quite a bit, probably since the inception of the podcast back in April, and I'm glad it lined up. So for everybody out there, Ange, if you want to kind of introduce yourself, that would be awesome.
All right. Hello, everyone. I would like to start off by saying that I'm also really excited and have had so many great conversations with Tyler outside of this context. So I'm happy to get something down officially and learn more about you in the process. I think that's going to be really fun.
Absolutely. So we're going to just kick it off real quick with something that's been going on for, I believe, the past like 8 or 9 days, which happens every 4 years in the Summer Olympics. A lot of good events going on, a lot of interesting new events also happening. But highlights of the past, I would say, a couple days were the women's gymnastics team winning a gold. The men actually medaled in what was it? I'm forgetting the name of it. It's where you're on the ring on the horse or whatever, and he's
The
swinging
pommel
around.
horse,
Yeah,
the
the
pommel
pommel
horse
horse.
guy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think that's U.S.'s first medal in like 15 years or something in the pommel horse, which
Oh
is
my
pretty.
gosh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
And
crazy.
the guy who won it is he's a young kid, but he has some sort of eye disease, if I'm thinking correctly.
Wow, I
I'll
didn't
have
know
to
that
look that
either.
up.
That makes sense because his eyes were closed. I feel like the majority of the event, it was very iconic, and I feel like the internet was eating it up that he seemed so unbothered, and then he got on that horse and just whipped
Yeah,
out one of the best performances.
absolutely. Yeah, and it's incredible that not only was he able to get a bronze medal in that, I heard that that was the only event that he qualified in. So, being an
Mhm.
athlete and around the sport that much, just having to sit back for fucking 3 weeks and watch your teammates succeed at something
Mhm.
that you also, want to take part in has got to be tough. Almost as hard as probably competing, in that one event itself.
Yeah, no, I can't imagine the pressure that these athletes are feeling, especially when you have to sit and wait until the very last moment. I think that some of the stuff I read said that he clinched the medal for them, like that his points really pushed them over the edge for that, which is
Yeah, I
amazing.
believe it. I believe it. No, he got a 14.866, which is really good, I guess. I don't know. I mean, I follow gymnastics enough to know, what's going on. But not both of my sisters. My youngest sister did gymnastics for like 8 years. So I went to the meets, watched the floor routines and the bars and all that stuff. But I mean, come on, these women are so unbelievably like sophisticated in what they do. It's wild.
So crazy. Bodhi and I just watched the skating like finals, I guess, for the
Yeah,
boys and the girls. That was also really fun. I'm a big fan of like the Red Bull TV type of sports where people are doing like crazy shit on a bike or just things that I've never done. I was like very much an inside child reading books and stuff. So seeing a 14-year-old girl win in like they were all wearing the coolest outfits, I must say.
oh
All
yeah.
of them know how to dress so well. That was really fun to watch. Really
Oh,
cool.
absolutely, absolutely. It's always a treat every 4 years, to be able to watch this and allow for country pride. To be honest with you, I mean, it's so fun that everybody in the world can come together and send athletes to compete, with one
Mhm.
another and put aside, differences, which I'm sure there's crap going on in the bunkhouses and whatever. But I was actually saying that to Grace the other night. I was like, can you imagine how awkward it would be to be, I'm sure people are people, right? So I'm sure a lot of them have similar opinions, overall, but they're living under different governments with different regimes and different propaganda being, shoved down their throats or showed to their faces every day. And I was like, I wonder what it would be like for, a Russian athlete and Ukrainian athlete competing against each other on the same court or like sharing words, and there's a level of respect that comes with athletics. that I think they both exemplify. But it's got to be a little bit awkward in that room, when your two countries are at war with each other, and the larger countries invading you. They clearly don't want to be a part of that. So I don't know. It was just interesting to me, and that's the type of shit I think about.
Yeah, for sure. I also was thinking the same thing. There's a lot going on right now, especially in that part of the world. And I feel like sports kind of elevates things into a different arena. Like it is about performance, but it's also about like storytelling and
Yeah.
narratives and family and love. So like all of those elements coming together, I feel like even if, two completely opposing sides are in the same room, they're here for that one event. And that is what's so intoxicating about sports. Like I played
Mhm.
sports when I was um, young and played through high school and loved it, but I stopped eventually. So now my fix is just going to games and watching stuff, and it hits different, but it's almost better. I feel like that might be a hot take, but I love sitting in the stands and watching soccer games. My first introduction was in Portland, and there, when
Oh
you
yeah.
score a goal, somebody rips out a chainsaw and saws off like a huge piece of wood from a gigantic tree, and the crowd goes absolutely insane. There's like fireworks everywhere. And from that moment on, I was hooked. I love soccer and really any type of event where fans are just super
Yeah.
serious about the game. I think it's really fun.
Absolutely. The thing that comes to mind for me is I think I discussed this in a previous podcast episode, but when I was living in DC, I went to a Washington Capitals playoff game, and every single person in that arena, no phones, glued to the ice. I mean,
Yeah.
we were all the way at the top, so I mean, I'm standing up like looking over 50 rows of people, but I mean, as soon as it gets towards the net, ooh, oh my god, everybody's freaking out. And that's something that you brought up. I love about soccer or football. Um, so I haven't told you guys, but I'm starting to or starting my fandom in the English Premier League this year. So it's a big deal for everybody out there. I swore off soccer my entire life. It was never my favorite sport, but
Really?
talking. Yes, yeah. I played soccer when I was young. I never had time for it. I played baseball, golf, football, a little bit of volleyball sprinkled in there, but I don't know what it was. I'm the type of person that if something's popular, I tend to dislike it just because everybody else likes it. I'm like, oh my god, I don't want to be part of the mainstream, the status quo, whatever. And I've learned a lot from that experience because there are a lot of great things that I have, bit my tongue and experienced, and I've been better for it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, for sure. I totally get that individuality complex. And I think it's
Yeah,
interesting actually, sorry, to just bring in the fashion aspect as well, but the way that those
yeah,
like entrance moments have transformed for the NBA and the WNBA and how that's getting people like um a bunch of famous people actually, they're kind of merging worlds. Like that's super fascinating and I can't wait to see where that takes us as well. Because streetwear obviously has been so important for such a long time. And I think that's why I personally resonated with the skate outfits as well because I could like walk on the street and see someone my age wearing something like that. Whereas you have like, is it Louis or Lewis Hamilton? Some of the fits that he
right.
pulls are, he's like I don't, he drives cars, I think. So I'm just
He's the
pivoting all
Formula
over the
One,
place.
right? He's the Formula One
Yeah,
guy.
yeah. So he's super rich and he's able to dress himself in whatever he wants. And I also eat that up too. The
Yeah,
ingenuity
absolutely.
of it all.
Absolutely, and like the emergence of streetwear was super interesting. I first got into it late high school, early college. I started buying the Supreme drops that came out, and I resold a bunch of that stuff. During my first few years of college, I actually bought a bot, to buy the shit for me online. But
Good for
unfortunately,
you.
yeah, it was super neat. I definitely don't regret the experience. I don't know if I made a whole lot of money, but I do have a lot of cool shoes to show for it. But I never really had the capital or like the business plan to actually carry out something like that. So if I were to go back and do that over, I'd be legit about it. I'd take out a loan, invest 10 grand into buying this stuff, because every time, another drop came out for some shoes or some, Supreme logo box tee that was super valuable, I didn't have the cash to put up front because I already have 15 items waiting to sell, right, for market price. So Going back, I
Hmm.
mean, it could have been great or it could have flopped. I mean, it got really popular really fast, and there's an influx of people in the market, right? So I don't know, man. I think about that all the time. I love my shoes, but it's gotten a little bit out of hand recently with all the, Nike's trying to oversaturate the market. I think New Balance has done a great job of elevating their footwear game over the last couple years. I see more and more of those, out and about than ever before.
Yeah, sure. We were just in New York City actually, and our we were staying in the Lower East Side, and Supreme is still, you know, there's a line around the corner every day of the week, it seems like. They really tapped into that formula, and
Yeah.
people are still eating that up. Bodhi used to do that too, actually. One of the first times I hung out with him after we started dating, he wanted to get the Supreme bike, and
Hmm.
he had like five of us on a computer. He was too stubborn to get a bot, but I think that that might have been the right move because it was
Absolutely.
so rare when we actually got
I
something,
lost
but
I
what a
lost money.
rush.
Yeah, I lost money on the
Yeah.
bot. I invested like $700 in it, and after a year and a half, they shut down the entire server, so I didn't get any of my money back.
Dang. Yeah, no, it's kind of that industry is very predatory, I feel like, because it's just like there's so many drops all the time and it's so enticing, right? Like that really appeals to us as Americans. We're like, oh, it just takes like one more and then I'll cash out and,
Yep.
make all my money back. But
Yep, absolutely. And I think it appeals to the exclusivity of it a little bit. You know,
mhm.
like this is a 1 in 500 item, and I happen to have one. You know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I personally love that. I think that people love thrift shopping for the same reason, right? Like you're getting a piece that you probably will likely not see on anybody else at the same time when you're wearing it. And that is inherently cool. I got really into thrifting during COVID and into upcycling. And that was how I entered into that world because I was so broke and babysitting for money. And you can find something that's really expensive and make it your own, um, which is kind of intoxicating every time. It keeps you coming back. I thought it was gonna have more of an effect on the fashion industry than it has, but
You think
it's still
so?
fun.
I've been thrifting for a while. Back in high school. Okay, we're going into story time really quick. I don't know if you know this about me, but it's I think you'll enjoy it. But anyway, when I was in high school, I had this buddy who was like this comic book connoisseur, right? And he knew everything about all the comic books and all the Marvel storylines and the DC stuff and all the outlier. I think it was Dark Horse Comics was the other one. That opposed the Marvel stuff. Anyway, we put together a business, right? And we went yard sailing twice a week. We went to a flea market every Saturday. Got up at 4 o'clock in the morning, drove out there, bought our stuff, and at first we set up a storefront on eBay, so we were selling everything online. And eventually, our stock got so large that we would go every Saturday. We'd get up at 4, drive to the flea market, make our first rounds for a lot of people that are yard sailing or bringing things just to offload it, where you get the good deals. Pick up stuff that people don't understand its value or worth. And then we make our couple rotations. There was an Amish bakery inside. Go get a breakfast sandwich, and then we sell all day. So we specialized in comic books, trading cards, action figures, and video games. So I still have a lot to show for that. I don't know how much money I ever made, but I mean, I have a dozen old consoles and old video games and a bunch of rare comic
Mhm.
books. I almost have an entire complete set of the base set of the original Pokemon cards. So like, cool shit like that. So yeah, that's what I did in high school. Not sure about everybody else out there, but yeah, I've always been somebody to, flip stuff, thrift stuff, and kind of to your point from earlier, um, I think it has changed the market a fair bit because I think a lot of people are going to these thrift stores and Goodwills, and now Goodwill is raising their prices because all these people are going in there to buy a boatload of clothes just to resell on their
Mhm.
Depop or their Poshmark or their eBay, storefronts. So I don't know. I thought that was kind of an interesting take because I don't really see it too much because I don't know anything about selling clothes or manufacturing clothes. Although I did
Mhm.
try to do that at one point in my life. Um, but yeah.
Good for you. I think that's awesome. I think that that entrepreneurial spirit is inherent. I feel like to curious people, and that's just one way of exhibiting that curiosity. It's like, how far can I take this? I have a really good idea. Um, to the thrifting point, I feel like through COVID, because people were on their computers more, at the same time that we had this rise in thrifting and, like a higher admiration for ingenuity and creating like really special outfits based off of pieces. There was also like these $200 Shein hauls or Boohoo, or like honestly H&M is up there in like one of the more destructive brands on the planet, and they do a really good job at greenwashing. So they're
Yep.
also really good at PR. Um, and I really thought that we were going to carry I thought that the thrifting, like the essence of that movement was going to win out and that we would see less falls like that. But I feel like consumerism is actually just, I don't know if it's gotten worse. It's always been bad. But I think
It's
on
hard.
TikTok, as I'm scrolling, I'm seeing a lot of just like blatantly consumerist posts
Yeah.
of somebody selling like really unnecessary things, but it's a part of a certain aesthetic in that,
Sure.
attracts people. But yeah, I mean, as somebody who has like been interested in clothes for a long time, and somebody who is getting into garment production, I am just so aware of how people like to spend their money, and I want to know as much as possible about that going into starting a business. Um, and there
Yeah.
really isn't a lot of education from like existing brands. So
Sure.
that's like the curiosity that led me to starting
Right.
the business that I'm starting now.
Yeah, that's awesome, and that's got to be on purpose, right? I mean, those big brand names, don't want other people breaking into the market with a new idea, right? They want to control that market share as much as possible. Real quick, I have two statements, and then I have a question for you. So I just
Okay.
wanted to explain greenwashing to everybody out there that might not, know what that term or that phrase is, and it's impacted us pretty significantly over the past, I don't know, 40, 50 years, with the Industrial Revolution and everything going on after that, politics aside. The biggest one I can think of, what was it? Was the Exxon, or is it Enron? Exxon, the spill. And they're paying these super small fines. Well, okay, let me back up. Maybe not super small to you and I, but super small to their
Them.
margin
Yeah.
sheet, right? Their balance sheet, right? So it's
Mhm.
more of a net benefit to this company to pollute the fuck out of our ocean or our waters or whatever they're using, and then pay the fine than it is for them to clean it up and then operate ethically, morally, environmentally friendly. So greenwashing is basically that, when they invest in marketing campaigns instead of trying to fix the environment or make it better for people and resources out there. Um, One quick thing I wanted to note, I actually read this on Reddit today, but I think two House members introduced a bill to ensure that all American flags going into production now have to be 100% sourced and made in the United States. Prior to this bill, it was only 50%. So a lot of the Chinese companies were buying materials from America, manufacturing it with child labor, and sending it back to us to sell for cheaper than what we can manufacture it for. So I guess the question I had for you, to follow that up, what kind of textiles are we using right now? Is there anything intuitive? You know what I mean? What can we look forward to in good designer brands or good clothing brands in the future?
I love that question. I never get to talk about this, and I have a lot to say, so go ahead and slow me down if that needs to
No,
happen.
no,
But
get going.
there are really exciting things happening in the garment industry, and I would like to start off by saying that bad things aren't like equivalent to Chinese production, right? Like you can have some of the most luxurious brands in the world sourcing things from China. From India does amazing embroidery and they specialize in certain fabrics. Like each of these places actually has thousands of years in history in garment production. But they're catering to Western consumers, and that's where we start seeing cheaper fabric, not enough, not even close to fair wages for the people that are spending time in those factories. And that's personally what I take issue with. And as a consumer, even before I started getting into clothes and starting my own business that I tried as much as I could to educate myself, but I realized that it was really hard to. So I bought a few books and learned about, there's a really cool initiative in Turkey, actually. They're trying to make, so a lot of synthetic material enables things to be stretchy. And what are our stretchiest garments, right? They're things that we wear every day: bras, underwear, athletic clothing.
Yep.
That's all plastic. 14% of all plastic manufactured is used in the garment industry, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it is. It's a lot.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, 200 to 500,000 tons of microplastics are introduced into the global marine environment every year because we're washing our clothes and those
Wow.
plastics are shedding off of our clothes. And that's an unknowing way that we as consumers are partaking in something that I think we all care about: the ocean. I know that that's something that tugs at all of our heartstrings. So
Yeah.
it's
Absolutely.
really cool that traditionally Turkey also had a history of non-transparency with their labor practices, but there are certain factories there and in Amsterdam that are trying to be innovative just for the sake of innovation and improving the environment. People are also going back to their roots and focusing on natural dyes and the ways that we can make natural dyes long lasting and vibrant. I'm really passionate about that and
It's
have
interesting.
gotten into that myself. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, as an American, there are really great manufacturers in America that do textiles. And if anybody needed to, or I guess had felt that they needed to start a business, all you need to do is research. Like Google is right there waiting for you, and it does take time, but
Yeah.
I have made relationships with Robert Kaufman, which is a family owned. Um, they're more of a dealer now. They started out by like manufacturing their own fabrics.
Hmm.
But yeah, they used to be based in New York City. Now they're based on the West Coast and um, canvas manufacturers. Like American workwear is as good as it gets. And we actually inspired a lot of trends all around the world in like the mid 20th century
Damn.
because of our utilitarian clothing, which I found really cool and interesting.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it's awesome. I think that people like to compare Tokyo and New York, but um, for a long time, Tokyo and well, just like Japanese people in general had a name for the way that American people dress, and it was like um, outlawed in Japan for a long time to wear
Really?
like yes, to wear jeans and like things that college students wear in
Right.
America. So like t-shirts and stuff like that. I don't know. I feel like we've kind of created this narrative that luxury has to happen elsewhere, but that's not true. We can make really beautiful, biodegradable, like earth-friendly things right here
Yeah.
on American soil. And why isn't a flag made from like durable cotton? I just never understood that. Why does it need to be plastic? You know, it's just like silly little things like that. It's just cutting costs for
Yep.
no apparent reason to me. But
Yep. And I think we're years into the sunk cost fallacy at this point. Like, you know, there's so much plastic in production. It's easy for us to make, it's easy to consume and then throw away. And we just toss it in some river somewhere in Brazil. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
nobody's any wiser. We don't think about it after we use it and dispose of it. Um, another material that I'd like to bring up as well, because I think this really shifted not only politics in the United States, but manufacturing as a whole, and not just the clothing industry. But I wanted to talk a little bit about hemp because I know hemp is an important fiber that's used or had been used in paper, clothing. They're even using it in concrete right now. Reinforced fiber concrete. What's your knowledge depth on that? Just like baseline, because I'm kind of interested in how that has affected the industry as a whole because they're not allowed to use it at all, right? I know they're trying to reintroduce hemp bills, but with the criminalization of cannabis or marijuana, you know, all that hemp production was put on hold.
yeah. I actually do not know very much about that. I'm educated on like flax linen and the way I'd imagine that it might be similar. I'm just like totally whiffing on this question, but
All good, all good.
you can make clothing based off of the plants in your backyard if you had the time to do that. Yeah, like all clothing is just a collection of fibers, and every single thing that we own has been touched by human hands. I think that like hemp is a fabric with a legacy, and it's sad that there's people trying to keep that from market share based off of something that I think is also unnecessary in the first place. But yeah, no, linen and hemp and even cotton isn't as sustainable and earth friendly as those fabrics. Like those
Hmm.
are the closest you can get to sustainable and ethical.
Interesting. I never knew that.
Mm.
Grace and I just ordered linen sheets, so I'm really excited for that.
Yeah, and linen ages pretty well. I would say if you take care of it, obviously you're not going to be ditching or dipping the natural fibers in bleach anytime soon. But for the most part, like I feel like there is so much storytelling in fashion, and we're in this era of like hyper consumerism, and there's
Yes.
one trend after the next. And so we're dominated by the most recent depiction in our heads of a fabric. And I think when people think linen, they think grandma or, you know, boho chic. And it can be used in so many different ways.
Right, absolutely. Something I wanted to bring up was what is it? Leonardo Del Vecchio. What is it? Essilor Luxottica. It's that company that old dude owns that is like what 150 of the different designer brands around the world. You know what I'm talking about?
Mhm. Yes.
Yeah, you
Um,
probably know a little bit more about that.
LVMH.
Yes.
But
Yep, that's right.
yes. So I actually follow I would suggest like anyone who's listening and is interested in fashion to follow Business of Fashion on Instagram. Um, but it's basically been chronicling kind of the fall of those major, I don't even know what to call them, conglomerates, I guess. Um, there's very little, like, I guess if you view it as an umbrella, the top doesn't really have that much to do with what's going on underneath it.
Hmm.
And so we're finding these like legacy brands like Balenciaga and Dolce and Gabbana and Gucci to be kind of stale. And it's because those people aren't really focusing on innovation per se. It's more like, what can we do to cater to the consumer in the next 3 months? And then we're
Right.
going to scrap that and start all over again. So there's so much saturation from basically the same point of view that consumers are starting to get smart and they're like, I'm not really interested in this anymore. And that is a positive thing. I think it's cool to see people researching different, like smaller brands to get their clothes from.
Absolutely. And I'll throw in a little tidbit here of why I think social media is good for the population and for the world. It's for exact reasons like that. It provides us more means and avenues to research, our own opinions and facts, right? And we're able to go out there and shop for 300 different brands. I'm probably, underestimating a little bit from the click of a button on my phone. Obviously,
Mhm.
there's a lot of disadvantages and shit that's happened since 2014 and the inception of like MySpace, Facebook, stuff like that, that has not been quite as good for us. But I think that that's incredibly helpful to people like you and I. Like I hear all kinds of shit on the media, on the TV, on my news feed, but I'm able to go on Safari or Google and I can look up three independent articles that are written by people with differing opinions, and then you can kind of fact check yourself. So that's something I do appreciate. Um, you know, happening, and for us to experience. It's really neat to be living in this day and age, and I really appreciate us, like our age, being like 26, 27, because we were just out of that group, where my younger sisters are, where they had smartphones by the time they were in middle school. You know what I mean? I still had a flip phone. I had genuine conversation with my friends. I wasn't sending memes or tweeting at other people talking shit. So I think that's also something interesting to think about when we look at our society and like the ages we are. I'm really really appreciative of that. So I understand between, not to say that I'm not trying to generalize, everybody in that group, because obviously there's outliers everywhere, and there's smart people and people that are less educated, right? That may not know any better. Um, but I think that I can very much separate a in life or real life um like communication or conversation compared to what I'm tweeting on my phone, right? I think all these people
Mhm.
are, you know, behind screens, they're not afraid to talk shit, but once you have to talk something out, hear somebody else's opinion, their biases, feel them out, it's much more difficult to do that in person. So that's something I do appreciate about social media a little bit. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, this LVMH is fucking massive. Oh, that ADHD. I remember what I was going to say now.
Okay.
Um, I want to talk about Virgil Abloh a little bit because I think he did some very interesting things, and after that, I feel like Louis Vuitton fell off the map after he passed
Mhm.
away. His what was it? The 7 shoes at Nike with the off white collaboration. Um,
Mhm.
Incredible shoes. I think he did a great job of creating, putting a story behind it, and selling that as a product instead of creating cool shoes and pushing it to the consumer.
Mhm.
That was the last guy I really followed in the high fashion scene, so to speak. What's going on after that? I mean, I kind of fell off. I'm sure you have a little bit
That's
insight.
funny. Honestly, I totally get that because Virgil Abloh is like probably one of the best to have ever done it. He was really good at storytelling and he was really good at unifying like I think so I've just been reading this book. Sorry, this is like a very short tangent, but
No,
Ways
no,
of
go for it.
Seeing. Ways it's called Ways of Seeing by John Berger. It's based off of a documentary in the UK and it was super weird, but like really touched a lot of people, so they turned it into a book and it's basically about how people look at things at the most basic level and there's like three or four essays and they kind of ramp up um, the intersections with which points of view affect the way that we understand visual information.
Whoa.
Um, yeah, super cool. I think about it all the time, especially as a literature major, the way that stories um, interact with the world around us. It's happening literally all the time. That's what marketing is about. But I think what Virgil Abloh had that a lot of people don't is that he infused soul into clothing in a way that only he could do. Like that was 100% his point of view, and nobody else is going to be able to do it like he did. It's um, like Balenciaga and Dior were houses started a very long time ago by men with singular points of view, and they succeeded based off of the message that they created around women's clothing. Um, I think now you're exactly right. Like LVMH is focused on numbers, and artists want to push stories and like different ways of seeing things. I don't know. I feel like with social media, it is positive. I think that one thing I grapple with is that we have so much information, but
Yeah.
not nearly as much knowledge about the things that we're seeing. So, like,
Right. Yeah.
and
Sure.
I think the trick is like Virgil did this well. You don't have to really know the backstory. It's about like the feeling. It's kind of ephemeral and
Yeah.
we all get it just by looking at something, but it's not obvious to us. There's something enticing and kind of addictive about that. He was like
Absolutely.
a real artist for sure.
Yeah, and it's fun to appreciate
Um,
those people that are really, really talented, right? Because I am not. I can draw stick figures okay, but that's the extent of like my artistry. You know what I mean? Like it's just fun.
yeah.
Same with athletics, like we were talking about. It's fun to watch people that are fucking insane and just so driven and compassionate and like,
Mhm.
just A1, I
Yeah.
don't know. Gets me excited.
Totally. No, I love that. And I feel like art is absolutely 100% subjective. That's talked about
Yeah.
in the book as well. It's like that constant, it's basically however we decide we would like to um endorse something as a fan or as a viewer. But there are lots of really cool small designers using education that they've had, whether it's like physically and informally dyeing clothes and teaching themselves how to do that, and then spreading that information for all of us to use, or people that did go to like FIT and started their fashion business and are using basically like that amount of clout and their connections to instill different messages other than like this is the cheapest,
Right.
trendiest thing that you can buy.
Yeah.
And they're all young and, you know, our peers essentially, which I think is really inspiring.
Yeah, it's not always about the money. And that your point about art being subjective, I think some people don't understand that. It's okay to interpret an art piece differently than the person sitting next to you. You're not the same person. You've had different life experiences. You've had different feedback from parental figures in your life, mentors, stuff like that. How all of that happens in your childhood and you growing up helps you interpret that differently. And it only means to you what it means. It doesn't mean to everybody else the same thing. And that's eh, I don't know. Maybe with some art pieces, more objective things, that like famous stuff, right? Or portraits. Maybe that's the case. But even so, they shade stuff differently. They make the light reflect on their face differently to show different, you know, emotions and feelings and stuff like that. So I really do think art is something that I do not have the time span for, but Grace and I just did a pottery class. I enjoy walking through
Nice.
the BMFA, stuff like that. I'm trying to get more integrated into the art universe, so to speak, because I love music too, and that's another branch of
Yeah.
it.
Absolutely. I think I'll never forget learning about this, but I don't know if it was in high school or college, and I can't even remember which like ancient Greek philosopher posited this to the world, but he essentially was like, art is born from leisure time. Like art
Mm.
is created, good thought is created by people that have free time.
Yep.
And it takes like a certain amount of refinement and education. I do have a direct quote actually that I use all the time and tell myself all the time when I feel like the art that I'm creating is bad. Ira Glass, who was the person who created This American Life. I don't know if you listened to that podcast. Oh my
Mhm.
gosh, it's so good. And you would love it, honestly. It's just kind of like stream of consciousness, but very thoughtfully created stories and interviews.
Interesting.
But he said that every person, every artist starts out with taste, but they don't have the practice to exhibit that taste and show that taste to the world. So a lot of people quit because they're like, I'm bad, I'm not good at this. And then we never get to experience their point of view. And that's a tragedy. Like he started when he was really young and I think he's older now and very successful and was able to I mean, I feel like This American Life is kind of a staple of our culture. At this point, there are so many people that listen. If he had quit, we never would have experienced that. So it's
Yeah.
good to be like, okay, maybe I'm bad at this, and then turn around and say, but I'm gonna keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. I think about that a lot too because it's especially in, I'm gonna push it back to athletics because that's the way I can put everything together a little bit easier. But imagine all of those players: Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, basketball, namely. But imagine if they didn't have the drive, if they didn't have the dedication, if they didn't choose to work hard. They were just as talented as everybody else that played in that league. But you know what set them above? They stuck with it. They put in the extra hours. They practiced. They perfected. And I think that can relate to not only athletics but most business ventures and opportunities out there, right? You got to put the time in, to really learn what you're doing. What's the quote? I think it's 10,000 hours is the generalized term. Once you have 10,000 hours in a specific subject or context, you're generally a quote unquote expert. um, but what you said at the beginning about having enough free time to create, that made me think of what Hunter said a couple weeks ago. His podcast just released today. I know this will be 2 months from now. So, everybody, if you're listening to this now, go check that one out. It's phenomenal. But we were talking about AI and machine learning and robotics, right? And what should be the goal of robotics, right? It should be to create robots that can wash the dishes, mow the lawn, clean our laundry, clean our house, not do math for us. Those are the things that we're supposed to be doing as what is it with our ingenuity, right? Creating new concepts, right? Driving new things. We don't want to be stuck doing extra chores while the robots are out solving, you know, theorems and complex science problems. Obviously, I think we need to work with computers, but he brought up an interesting point, and I can't stop thinking about that. I'm like, yeah, they should totally be what is it, introducing robotics and machine learning, AI, AGI, all of that fun stuff. And maybe I'm being a little bit naive, not understanding the whole concept. I have talked about this a little bit, but wouldn't it be so much better if they just did the menial tasks for us so we could go out and explore what we love to do and not have to work a 9 to 5 because all of our basic needs are met? Things are given to us because we've achieved this not higher level of consciousness, but like higher level of culture and collection. Like if we banded together all of our resources, is there really a reason why every single person on this earth couldn't have at least access to some food, shelter, and clean water? I don't think so. You know what I mean? Like I think that's definitely plausible. And we see these mega corporations using it for their own profit, not to benefit the greater good. So that's what upsets me a little bit. I'm sorry for going on a little bit of a tangent there, expanding on that, but it is a little bit upsetting. I'd like to see more of those stupid little tasks be done for us so I can go out and learn how to DJ, learn how to play the bass guitar, right? Do more of my podcast, the things that we truly love and enjoy. I think it's important to do
Yeah.
those things as people, right?
That's so real. I'm probably the wrong person to ask about AI, and I'll say this on the record, I'm an AI hater. Because I just like I use Adobe Illustrator like almost every day, and
Hmm.
they're using my artwork without my permission and feeding it into things that make better and better artwork.
Right.
I think I'm just kind of I'm a skeptic when it comes to AI. I think that it again, I'm naive as well. Like I am not familiar with these programs, but I do feel like what matters most is who is in charge of those things. And I just don't have a lot of trust for the people that are like creating and pushing
Yeah.
these incentives that I feel like honestly no one is really asking for. Like like
That's the huge problem. Yes,
yeah.
absolutely. There's no
I
real regulation and framework yet, and it's
mhm,
advancing so rapidly that it could be bad, it could be great, but we won't know because
yeah.
nobody nobody's doing anything about it. And I had my buddy on who's actually at the University of Alabama for computer science, and he was speaking to me on a couple of these things. He's super interesting. He's down to earth, super what is it, like healthy guy. He eats like the raw liver, um, semi carnivore diet. Like he's legit. He
Mm,
exercises all the time. Super good kid. But we were chatting about it, and I voiced a couple concerns. And I don't know if there's a solution to that. I think you're right. We just need to have better people in positions to make those decisions, right? And something cynical, I will say, like I think the only people that make it to those positions of power to be able to manipulate, those things are people that aren't afraid to step on others to get to where they're at. And at that point, like, they're going to screw everybody over anyway. You know what I mean? Like people that play fair and like, have good intentions and good ethics and morals sometimes get stepped on by these people. And I think we see that a lot in politics, which just pisses me off. I don't, I hate all of it for the most part. And I shouldn't, I should be invested in my local government, right? Because they're
right.
they're providing for me, right? They're fixing my roadways.
Mhm.
They're upgrading the electrical grid, they're running snow plows when it snows. But like it pisses me off because these people just seem so out of touch with reality because they're so used to just using other people to get to where they're at. And don't get me wrong, there are people, in those positions that are great people, but like the examples I see and a lot of stuff I see in the news is, straight up that, people being assholes to get what they want.
Yeah. I I think a lot of us are like chained to the way of life that we've been forced to live because of this like 8 hour day, 40-hour week work cycle. And like, honestly, it doesn't matter where you fall in the political spectrum. The fact of the matter is, like, there is somebody or a few people at the top hoarding wealth. And we
Yep.
are like working just to like pay rent and buy food and enjoy our lives. And I think that the enjoyment thing drives this consumerist culture because we want convenience when we get home from work. We don't want to buy raw vegetables and cook like an hour long delicious nutritious meal. We want like a Trader Joe's or like Kroger frozen something, and just to make things easy, we're gonna pay for more Amazon goods. And I think all the time, I actually just saw this recently. Um, and I'm actually quoting Jack Kerouac on a podcast, but he said, like, he has this little anecdote about how he was going out to buy an envelope, and his wife was like, you're a famous writer, like, why don't you just buy a bunch of envelopes? You don't need to go out and buy an envelope every time you need to send a letter. And he was like, but I enjoy walking to get my envelope. I see cute children. It's nice
Mhm.
outside. I notice a different plant that I didn't notice before. I'm a part of my community. Like, those things sound really nice. And, as you're saying it out loud, you're like, that's kind of idealistic. Like, what a rosy point of view. But that's only in opposition and in juxtaposition to the lives that we actually live, which are like basically just, most of us are working jobs that we don't love. But I think it's nice to, I don't know, I think as somebody who, and I know that you probably understand this as well, starting your podcast, if you find something that you really enjoy and can come home to, it does make those things a lot easier. And I've tried really hard not to think about, oh, I need to make this thing that I really enjoy big enough to make me the salary that I'm making currently, because I feel like that much pressure kind of takes the joy out of it. But
Absolutely.
I think, yeah, that's like there's that fine line of not really wanting to think about that hard
Yeah.
truth in the back of your head all the time, but also it's inspiring and sometimes produces enough drive to make something really cool, like your podcast or,
Yeah,
a clothing
100%.
page.
No, I totally agree with you. What I was gonna say is the reason why they make us work 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, 40-hour work week. So we're too tired when we come home. We have to rely on those processed goods, those packaged meats. They inject a bunch of antibiotics and steroids in chickens that are kept in fucking one by one containers and live their entire lives in captivity just to be eaten by a human, right? Like they want
Mhm.
us to be reliant on that. So I don't think they'll ever move to a 4-day work week. Like I would be so thankful for something like that because I could get home after 6 hours. I could cook a nice meal. I could go to the gym. I could walk with grace. I could go see my
Mhm.
friends. It would give me a lot more opportunity to connect with my community, like what you were saying. And another cynical point of view. I apologize for bringing another one up, but I think that's to what is it, to generalize and what is it, repress the masses, just kind of keep them reliant on a specific source. And it's bad for everybody. I mean, the amount of shit in our food today is absolutely ridiculous.
I know. I mean, speaking as somebody who went vegan like 4 or 5 years ago, I do feel a difference in the way that I wake up every single day. It's not like I think you can achieve that eating meat as well, but I think it took becoming vegan and having to read labels and stuff and like kind of educating myself on food brands to make me more conscientious. And a lot of people don't have the time or the money to do that, which
Right.
is really unfortunate because I do feel like it was a positive change in my life that I don't really get to talk about because it is a very like privileged point of view. I think that, being vegan isn't inherently more expensive, but those fake meats are definitely more expensive than like 3 pounds of chicken breast at Kroger. I haven't bought meat in so long. You can correct me if that's
No,
not the right
no,
amount,
the
but
impossible meat's definitely more expensive. But my only worry with that crap is it's all fake. It's full of like polyunsaturated oils and soybean and canola oil and all that crap.
mhm.
Did you know that canola oil was originally used as like a lubricant or adhesive for heavy machinery, and that is a byproduct, and that's where they got it from. They figured they could sell it as cooking oil, which is totally absurd.
My
But something
God.
I did want to kind of ask you. First, I'd like to state that I totally believe you because I've researched a bunch of like different diet schemes and stuff like that, and it does regulate your body chemicals totally different than when you have all of this crap in your system. So I 100% believe that you're probably getting better sleep. You're waking up well rested. You don't have sinus issues in the morning, clear skin, stuff like that. You're getting all those essential vitamins and nutrients, that we need to survive. But I guess kind of my question is, what made you choose that? I personally, I don't think I could give up red meat or maybe just chicken. I don't know. I could eat like ground beef and chicken forever, every single day, and rice probably, maybe some vegetables. But like, I understand the whole concept behind it, and I totally agree with you. The whole chicken stuff that I was talking about is definitely a huge proponent. But can you kind of generalize it why you chose to do that? I'm very for it, but I couldn't give up chicken and beef, man.
Yeah. No, that's totally fair. Well, I actually grew up in a house that didn't eat meat very much. My mom worked really long hours, and just like honestly, meat is hard to cook. You have to defrost it. There's like lots of stuff that she would have now as an adult, I totally get. You have to think
Yeah,
about when you're
right.
grocery shopping and when she would cook it, it like sorry mom, like it wasn't that good. Like she's a way better cook now because she's had time to enjoy her life and you know
Right.
learn how to cook well. But back then she was just like at her wits end. So I started cooking for myself and I didn't really like meat. So I just was vegetarian um through middle school and high school, and then I got to college and met my friends and had Chick-fil-A for the first time. And I stopped being vegetarian for like 2 or 3 years. um, and yeah, I met Bodhi. And for those listening, Bodhi is my boyfriend. And he, at the time, had been vegan for a couple years and was just like, well, you already tried the vegetarian thing. Like, I was thinking of becoming vegetarian again. And he
Right.
was like, you should just try cutting out the other animal products. And I was like, I've actually never thought of doing that before. So it was kind of a little experiment to myself, and it was
Sure.
like totally personal. So I was like, I'm gonna go very slow. I cut out cheese. I think I cut out milk first and then cheese. I stopped with like the things that I love most. I love fish. I still eat
Mhm.
fish sometimes. I'm not like the best vegan, but I don't think it's about like I don't have a moral condition on the food that I eat or like a moral judgment on the food that other people buy. It's more like an extension of my own personal beliefs. And
Right.
I don't know, I just feel like I think that the agriculture system in America is pretty fucked up and
Mhm.
I don't really want to give my money to that. So it's like a protest in that way. And
Right.
also, I did read Peter Singer's book that came out in 1972. I don't know if you like know of that, but it's kind of like this it started veganism as like a popular movement and it's insane the things that he wrote about the agriculture industry. It helped to drive a lot of reform as well. But I wouldn't say I'm
Interesting.
necessarily that type of evangelical vegan. I'm not somebody who's going to be like um talking about it all the time with the expectation that I'm going to change people's minds. But I just hope that it's more like an example that I can set if anybody wants to pay attention. And if
Yeah.
not, it works for my lifestyle. So I've never stopped. I personally was just talking about this Bodhi last night. I don't think that I can ever cook raw meat like ever again. I just never, and I was good at it. Like I really enjoyed learning how I love cooking. I talk about it with Grace and with you all the time. But veganism kind of like challenges you to try new things. You
Absolutely.
have to be creative. And we're not big meat substitute people. We'll like treat ourselves to a Beyond Burger every once in a while or like a hot dog. But for the most part, we're just eating vegetables and rice, and I'm really happy for it. I love veggies. Can't
Yeah.
complain.
No, that is awesome. Phenomenal. Just the way you approach it, makes me love that, right? Like I said, I don't know if I'd ever be able to do something like that, but your passion for animals, right? And you understand where that's come from. You're very educated on free range, the free range, pasture range, all that fun stuff.
Mhm.
How they're destroying. Well, okay, let me back up a second. We had been one with nature. We are one with nature. We move further away from that every day by building ourselves in concrete boxes, driving to the grocery store, not growing produce in our backyard, et cetera, et cetera. Right? There's no reason why we should be putting other sentient animals, other sentient beings into fucking pens and prodding them with needles and sticking shit in them their entire lives just to eat them,
Yeah.
right? That's terrible. And there's a lot of validity to that. But on the other hand, I wanted to kind of bring up what's called regenerative farming, if you're familiar with that at all.
Yes, that's super interesting.
Right. So, basically they're using every single chemical and byproduct that comes off of the animals to either refertilize, reinvest in their farm, or create a good life for these animals that they're eventually going to slaughter and we eat. And I think that is a great
Amazing.
that's a great solution to this problem. But what are the profit margins on something like that? Not very good.
Yeah, you're right. I don't know. I think that that's what I say. Like when I say veganism is privileged, it's like such a Western concept to be like, I'm going to not purchase meat from the store. Like a lot of people are relying on livestock and like the things that they're growing in their garden for their meals, and meat is a delicacy. Like it would be so disrespectful for me as a white Western woman to look at somebody across the world and be like, you should stop slaughtering your oldest cow that served your family very well over the years. Like that would be a ridiculous thing to say. So I just think that food is so personal and also so emblematic of culture. And it's so interesting that America has veered into this space that it has, where we've really doubled down on the things that most of the world have seen that are bad and have stopped doing. Like in Europe, it's not the same. Unfortunately, I have to say that. Like I remember every time I've gone, I'm a firm believer in trying food to understand culture, and I'll have cheese or I'll have fish. I probably won't eat meat again because it would make me sick, but for the most part, like those the cheese doesn't make me ill. Like I'm not lactose intolerant there. I can eat
Right.
and try different things and they don't make me feel as bad as when I'm consuming them here for some reason.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of shitty ingredients and chemicals in our food. But another important thing that I kind of wanted to bring up, and I saw this on a Netflix documentary like a month ago, I think on a Saturday night after Grace and I got home from the bar. I was like, haha, this looks funny. Let's watch it. But they were talking about how the microbiome adjusts to your general, palate and what kind of food you're eating. So specific people that cut, for example, meat out of their diet for 5 years would get legitimately sick from eating
Mm,
a burger or a chicken breast or something like that because their body is not um, in tune with breaking down those chemicals and processing them as calories, energy to produce for the rest of your body. So I thought that was kind of interesting too. The way they did it was they slowly introduced new foods to all these people's diets to get them to build up a tolerance towards it, so they could generally go back to eating a balanced, healthy diet.
yeah. No, I think that I mean, there's like the whole problem with grocery stores not being available to people in rural communities and stuff like that. Like, it just shouldn't be hard to eat well and treat
Yeah,
yourself well. And it's preventative in a sense as well. It keeps you healthier for longer. And you probably save money in the long run in that sense. But then again, you have to circle back around to, keeping us in a place where we're spending money on things
right.
all the time instead of doing it ourselves.
And not only are we spending money at the supermarket, it gives us cancerous diseases, which then we have to go to the privatized healthcare system in the United States to treat our care, right? And then what do we do from there? We go to the pharmacy and we get opiates or other prescription drugs, which doesn't fix the issue. It's a temporary solution, which causes us to go back buy more food. I think it's a never-ending cycle. So I think that's a huge issue that we have been living in pretty much our entire lives in the United States. Not to say that that can't be changed or challenged by any reason. And I think people are getting more hip and knowledgeable of what's actually going on. But that brings me to my other point. You and Bodie can come live on my farm when we're old if you want. You can buy a plot of
Yes.
land and have a whole compound. I want
Yeah.
chickens
Oh
and
my
goats.
God.
Yeah, all
What a
that stuff.
dream. That sounds amazing. Oh, I always say if I kept my own chickens, I would eat eggs all the time. I miss eggs probably the most out of like everything. And that's
I
a
want
goal for me at some point. I think that that sounds like paradise.
I want a chicken coop so bad, so bad. A couple of my coworkers have them. They brought in fresh farm eggs and they're like
Uh,
they let them out, they roam the
mhm,
pasture. They were delicious. The best eggs I've ever had, other than, sometimes we go to nice restaurants and they have farm fresh
mhm.
eggs, right? But like I don't really have access to that. Or else I'm spending $7 at Kroger for ones that are pasture raised, not free range, because free range they get an hour of outside time every day and they still have to live on a 1x2 concrete pad or whatever it is. It's small. And then you have the what is it in between? It's cage free, which they lump them all together in a small area and they live, but technically it's cage free, so they're allowed to market that. And then you have your traditionally raised, which are, I think it's 62 square inches or something like that, that they're kept in a cage their entire lives and are slaughtered. So
Um,
I don't know, man. I'd love to have some chickens out back, lay me some eggs every once in a while, And you're living off the land at that point. You're feeding back into nature so you can reap, you know. And I think that's really important. You gotta give back to get. I think that's super important, especially in nature context. Um,
Absolutely.
we just wrapped up Animal Farm was our first book club on the Slanted Attic. So I think the whole egg thing with the hens was kind of funny because that made me think of that, right?
Yeah. No, honestly, I haven't read Animal Farm since high school, but that allegory is so apt for American culture, just all of the farm animals. And I also love how, like, okay, so do you know Braiding Sweetgrass?
No,
It's
what's that?
written by, I'm dropping so many book recs, and I
Oh,
honestly,
I've got them all already. They're on the list.
okay, sorry, but this one is really good. I feel like out of all of the ones that I suggested, if anybody is interested in this topic, definitely read that one. It's basically it's written by a Native American woman, and she just describes the ways in which Native cultures approached things like that. Like, I don't know, it's crazy how that is the original American culture, and it is not like that at all anymore. I couldn't recommend that book more. And regenerative agriculture. It's a hard title, but also worth the read. That's on our bookshelf. And we thought for a moment, honestly, urban farming isn't that difficult. My mom lives in Oakton, Virginia, and her neighbors raise chickens and keep goats and have dogs, and all of those animals are really happy and healthy,
Yeah,
and they do get to reap what they sow. They get to have fresh eggs all the time, and my mom gives them fresh vegetables from her garden. And once you leave their driveway, there's a Buffalo Wild Wings right across the street. So it's very possible to have like a little oasis in the middle of like a very chaotic urban place like Northern Virginia. Keeps me inspired personally.
yeah. And that brings me back to the whole community aspect that you were talking about earlier. The fact that she's able to trade those things with her neighbors and be kind and thoughtful and all of that stuff, that just brings us closer to one another. And something I wanted to say about Native American tribes and tribalism, before the US, the colonialists, excuse me. That was really difficult. Before they came, I was talking to Hunter about this as well. They formed tribes. They were smart enough not to get into groups that were too large. They respected the land, only farmed specific areas. They gave back I guess now we know it's nitrates in the soil, right? They put them back in there. Yeah, however you do that, in the 1700s or 1600s, even before that, probably 1500s, whatever. And
Mhm.
they were able to work alongside animals, right? I think once the colonialists came in, the bison were extinct within like 10 years or something crazy like that because they just hunted the shit out of all of them. Overproduction, overfeeding, and that's, I think, one of the things that plagues us as the US, the want for more and the need for more, right? I think we're never satisfied with what we have. And that brings, full circle to what you said earlier. And I wanted to speak on that a little bit because you had mentioned that we continue to double down. And I think that's one of our largest weaknesses, other than, what I was just suggesting, because there's such an opportunity for us to step back and say, hey, maybe we did this wrong. Maybe there's another way to go about it. There's another solution. We need to think outside the box. Instead, we just create a way to temporarily solve the problem or to dive in further, right? And it makes me sad, honestly, because we kicked all these beautiful people out of here and now we have nothing left and don't really know how they live, other than what we see on reservations, which I'm sure they can't be living a happy life because they got pushed into an extremely small rural area. None of their heritage is probably even where they live currently. So it's
Mhm.
just sad. It's really sad, what they did a long, long time
Yeah.
ago. But
I mean, we could have definitely benefited from the knowledge that like those men tried to wipe out back then.
yeah,
People were burning things, controlled, keeping wildfires at bay. that's a good way to revitalize soil, let things die, move to a different place, come back to that plot in 4 years. Like a lot of our national parks were actually sacred places and they knew to keep them untouched. They didn't
Right.
need federal regulations to keep people from doing stupid things on
Yep.
that land. They knew that it was special. And that inherent understanding, I think, is kind of, I mean, in a capitalist culture, we're all just bereft of it all the time. Because
Yep.
we're focusing on what's right in front of us. We're forced to, though, you know? Like, I don't think I think people get tired or roll their eyes when um, colonization, or like capitalism is brought up, but it's because it's so ingrained in everything around us. And once you start seeing those things, you're like, oh, it actually, there is an alternative and it's right there, but we don't really have the power at the moment to turn things around.
Absolutely. Everything I have on my desk right here is brand labeled, right? They want you to be
Mhm.
a part of the brand, a part of the circle, right? And they want you to purchase more of their goods. It's a capitalistic race, right? Like I have a Hydro Flask water bottle, I have a Razer keyboard, I have an Acer monitor, right? And we go to work or to school or to play, whatever we're doing, and we argue with other people that, my monitor's XX and Y and Z, and it's this much better than what you have here. It's all competition, and our culture is really built upon that, right? That's what drives ingenuity almost. So I think there are some good aspects that come out of it. I do hate our healthcare system, but damn if they aren't good. You know what I mean? Like we do have access to some of the best healthcare in the world because of the way the system is set up. Now, does it get everybody what they need fairly? No. Does it help people in what they need the most? Probably not. But for extremely specialized instances and certain care, we do have by far the best. And positives and negatives for everything.
Yeah, totally. And I think full circle, I guess, to bring it back to the Olympics and to discuss fabrics and kind of like tie everything that we just talked about into that. I just heard about a story of a surfer who decided to research the usage of neoprene in his wetsuits. And he found out that there is a sole source located in Louisiana. And this factory is built on an old plantation, and the surrounding area is all people descended from former slaves. And these people are getting cancer at alarming rates. But the EPA has been trying to sue the factory for decades and try to keep it closed. But they're technically operating under the zero point 0.2 micrograms of pollution, um, which tries to prevent people from getting sick, but people are still getting sick. And so this documentarian decided to say, I would like to put this in front of consumers. I feel like that's really the only way that we see change is to make brands listen to people who are willing to hand over their money. And Patagonia was the first to do that. So they created this really cool, innovative, natural neoprene replacement. It's called Ulex. And they take sap from a rubber tree and like put a bunch of pressure into a machine and turn it into a foam and compress the foam. And Ulex can literally do everything that neoprene does. It's basically rendered
Oh,
neoprene as like its usage is moot at this point. So
wow.
we see like brands that are on the lower end of the spectrum using Ulex 100 for all of their like clothes.
Right.
And that's like a surefire way to get that into a ton of people's hands. You can use Ulex to um, repair your neoprene wetsuits. That's how
Huh.
similar the
Yeah.
fibers are. And I think it really does touch on those points that you said. Like we love shortcuts, we love convenience. Neoprene was something that we didn't want to use rubber trees anymore because they're biodegradable, because they're natural. And those garments eventually wear out and they degrade in the sun. Um, and so they created neoprene to keep surfers warm and to have long lasting wetsuits. And all it took was a little more research and a
Mhm.
brand like Patagonia with a bunch of spending power. And they were able to kind of put a notch into that industry. And he's hoping to see the Olympics in 2028 to be completely neoprene free, which I think
That
is
would be
really cool.
awesome. these are the things that get me excited to read on the internet or to learn about, because it really
Yeah.
restores, for lack of a better term, I know everybody uses it on TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, whatever. It restores my faith in humanity, right? It really does. It's genuine. Like,
Hmm.
these are people that care. So
Yeah.
it's really cool to see that. One little other note I'd like to point out before we start wrapping it up here is, I don't know if you've been on, what is it, epawater.gov or EWG
You're not.
Tapwater, ewg.org/tapwater. So this is the EPA's database for all water aquifers and sources in cities across the world, and it tells you the
Whoa.
contaminants and the levels of contaminants for every city that you're in. So, like you were saying, a lot of the thresholds from the EPA for extremely cancerous and hazardous materials are, set at 0.002 parts per million, right? And we are only getting 0.001. That doesn't say that we're not getting cancer from these things. It's just saying that it's below
Yes.
the allowable threshold, which is fucking terrible. I'm like, I don't want any of this shit in my water. You know what I mean? But for
Yeah.
those of you out there, check it out. It's super interesting to see what you're drinking. My buddy recommended a reverse osmosis filter. Now, for all you
Hmm.
guys renting out there, probably not something doable, because you do have to cut into your plumbing, to install that. Um, but yeah, it's like, all these harmful chemicals that are leaching into our groundwater, and just is what it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I know. And again, we're drinking plastic and eating plastic constantly because we just can't put down the Lululemon leggings. And it's not even like it's Lululemon's fault, right? It's not
Right.
us as
Yeah.
a consumer necessarily. It's like there is a better option. It exists. That fabric that I was talking about in Turkey, that's naturally stretchy. It doesn't have any forget the word now, and I'm so steeped in this, but of course it's out of my brain. Elastane. Like everything that's stretchy has at least 3% elastane in it, maybe two, and that's literally plastic. So to find a naturally stretchy fiber is incredible, and we just need one brand with the willpower and the marketing power to take that factory up on their offer, and things could change, you know? It's good that we're talking about it and like getting curious about those things. I'm like you. I love a good internet deep dive. I'm doing that all the time. Hopefully some of the things that we suggested today will inspire people.
Absolutely. And that's my favorite thing to do, is talk to other people with maybe a little bit differing opinions than myself. It's always important to have a contrasting conversation, right? If you always agreed with everything your friend was talking to you about, you wouldn't have a conversation. It'd just be somebody talking and you nodding your head, you know? So I think it's
Mhm.
important for us to have these conversations and to explore the different avenues or options that we have for multiple types of fabrics, food that we eat. There are options out there. There's not one rhetoric like we were led to believe much throughout, the early 20th century, or the late 20th century. I'm sorry, after kind of Reagan got in there, established the media, the television, it was all one sided. You get what, two or three news channels that tell you all of your information, right? You're not able to go out and explore, right? Other than individual conversation. If you meet a guy at a bar and he's like, "Oh my God, this new Ulex fabric, that Turkey found out it's replaceable for neoprene and doesn't cause cancer. How about that?" And then that's how you find out about, interesting stuff. So
Mhm.
just being able to use this platform to talk to you and the many other guests that I've had, it's just been an incredible experience, just to hear what you guys have to say, and just all of your interests. I know we do talk about this type of shit all the time at the bar, at your house, whatever we're doing. you
Yeah.
know it's fun to put it somewhere, right, for other people to listen and have opinions on, because I think that's what we severely lack in today's society, is the art of communication and conversation. We are slowly
Yeah.
forgetting how to talk to one another face to face.
Hmm. I think this is really cool. I think it's been such a pleasure, and I think it's a unique experience. I've never done this before. It's my first podcast interview. You guys will be finding Tyler out when I'm famous one day, or
Right.
vice versa. Maybe they'll discover my fashion brand based off of your awesome podcast. But I think it's cool because like there are so few moments throughout my day where my attention is completely zeroed in and focused
Right.
on a conversation like this. And it's not just about like somebody else being on their phone or watching TV. It's like when we're out at a bar, there's seven different TVs going around. And, like this was such an enjoyable experience. I think that you are really, really good at what you do. And I can't wait to see where this goes. I'm going to be listening for all of your other cool, interesting guests too.
I appreciate that. And you were wonderful, very intricate, knowledgeable about what you were talking about. You make for a great guest. And, you're one of my good friends too. So it's easy to talk to somebody, you have a lot in common with or share, that mutual relationship. So I really appreciate you taking an hour and 15 minutes to talk to me on this podcast that 10 people are going to listen to. How about, hey, it's like what you were saying. It's something I enjoy. It's joyful, right? And
hmm
I like to question people on on their expertise or what they like to talk about, because that generally gets more out of somebody. And that's what it's all about, man. Learning your fellow humans, learning what they're all about. How are you supposed to interact in day-to-day society if you don't know the person next to you or like your coworkers? Or but real quick sidebar before I get into this, I think, or before we end up the podcast. So I think when I went in last October, um, there were no team building events. Nobody did anything with each other outside of work. Now I'm getting us in a fantasy football league. We did NCAA bracket tournament, all that fun stuff. And it creates a better environment for people to work in, right? Not only work, but to play, to enjoy yourselves, right? We need that too. We can't just work, work, work. You have to blow off steam. You have to do those things you enjoy. It's so important to not only your mental health, but also your physical health, right? I think, from people having mental health issues, depression, anxiety, a lot of those other, things that are going on, that results in more of them not expanding past their comfort zones, going outside to meet people, go to the park, whatever. And that creates, more and more issues of a physical sense as well. We'll leave that for another podcast because I'd actually love to talk to you about that, because I know you are extremely knowledgeable about it. But for everybody out there, thanks for sticking with us for almost an hour and 20 minutes. We'd like to thank Ange again for taking the time out of her night here in beautiful Richmond, Virginia, to be here with us on the Slanted Attic Experience. For those of you out there that do not follow us on any of these platforms, we're at Slanted Attic on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And you can find us at the Slanted Attic Experience on Spotify and YouTube. So thanks everybody for listening. We'll see you on the next one. Peace out.